Ladies and gentlemen, it's that time again. It's time for the J. Craig Podcast. Playing on headphones near you.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the J. Craig Podcast. I'm Jay. If you're not familiar with the J. Craig, we are a movie entertainment podcast. We focus on movies and all things related to the cinematic arts. So if that sounds like your cup of tea, hit the subscribe button, like and follow us, and check out all of our podcast episodes and all our movie reviews at thejcraig.com. So I'm doing a solo episode today. Craig should be back in fashion very soon. I'm getting the word that it might not be long, so hopefully that'll happen soon. But for right now, I want to have a topic about the summer movies because we're at the beginning of August right now. And we have 3 more weeks of August, and I don't see anything on the plate that I really want to go see except for maybe Meg. So because the summer is ending in such a fashion, I started to wonder, is this a bad year for summer movies? And then taking that a little step further, what has happened to the summer movie? Is the summer movie, in fact, dead? Has a summer movie died? It's something that's been happening since the late 70s and going into the 80s and 90s. And then there was some different changes that's happened over the past couple of decades. But I'm wondering, is the summer movie dead? Because now you have movies sporadically placed throughout the year. Instead of summer having Star Wars, now you have it sometime in summer and sometimes in December. Right? Now, instead of having everything happening in those 3 summer months, we're having superhero movies in November and December. You're having your big budget spectacle movies in April and March. So you're having them spread out, which I think is great for the viewer because now we can kind of go through the entire year and see really good, awesome things that you want to see throughout the summertime. Now, what is a summer movie to you? Because for me, summer is the big budget blockbuster, right? The spectacle movie. Why? Because you want to, it's that memorable moment, those memorable scenes that everyone's packed in the theater, that you're waiting in line to get into, and that you talk about it with your friends, and then you can't wait to go see it again. It's those memories I have from the 80s and 90s and seeing movies that make me want to see the summer movies. It's great that they're all sporadically placed now, but still, that summer movie to me means that spectacle. But if you take a look at what comes out in the summertime, there's a lot more than just the big budget spectacle movie. You're always going to have your big comedy, whether it's Hot Shots or Caddyshack or Pineapple Express or Talladega Nights. You're always going to have those in the summertime. You're also always going to have your obligatory horror movie. Now, starting in 75 with Jaws and 79 with Alien, in 1980, Friday the 13th came out for the first time, and it was summertime. And from that point on, every year has a big horror movie, and I think that's really cool. And I'm surprised by that because you would think it'd be more like towards October, Halloween time frame, but nope, summertime is where the placement is for a good horror movie. Always, every year. I know there's been a couple this year that I don't go see because I'm a wimp, but back in the day, that's what it was all about. So you got the comedy, you have your horror movie, you're always going to have a big animation movie. Now, I don't know where this started at exactly. It might have been Pocahontas, and then you got Lion King. And every year, this year, we had The Incredibles 2. Every year, you have your big animated movie. And then you have your big budget movies, obviously. You have your spectacle movies, your tentpoles, the movies that they want to turn into franchises or franchises that are going to keep, insisting that they need to keep making them. But then you always had, especially in the 80s and 90s, and now again in this decade, it changed in the 2000s, but your big action hero movie. I'm talking about the Sylvester Stallones, Arnold Schwarzenegger, the Bruce Willis movies that then went into the 90s as well. But then in the 2000s, that took a kind of a big shift. And you had the Jason Statham and the Jet Li movies. But now that's coming into effect again in this decade, the 2010s, with more like the Rock movies, right? So you're still getting the big action hero movie set piece. So there's a lot of things that you can be looking for when it comes to summer movies, not just the big budget movies. There's a lot of cool intangibles that you'll see throughout the summer months. So I look back at 2018, the summer months here, and I was actually quite surprised to see that there's a lot of good quality movies. Deadpool 2, Incredibles 2, Mission Impossible Fallout, Solo, a Star Wars story, Sicario 2, and Ant-Man and the Wasp. Now, what's the one overriding factor? Well, they're all pretty good movies, but they're all sequels or prequels in some ways. That's, I think, the irritating factor that people have with today in Hollywood is the originality seems to be dead. And now, originality is not dead. There's lots of great examples of that. But as far as your big budget blockbuster movies, I think the originality died in the 80s and 90s, and I'll get to that in a little bit. But are summer movies dead? With an example like that, I would say, no, they're not. But what happened to summer movies? Because now they're not original anymore. Now they're just sequels. And sure, you have movies like Upgrade and Hotel Artemis and Skyscraper and The Meg, which aren't derived from something else, even though might be taken from something else, but they're not actual sequels. Even Jurassic World 2 came out this past year, another sequel which made a lot of money. So I don't think summer movies are dead, but I want to dissect this a little bit. I want to dive into this to see exactly what is going on within these summer months and go through a couple of different decades and see if I can come up with something here. And I think I found some interesting things to talk about. 2017 had another plethora of sequels, starting with Guardians of the Galaxy 2. You had Wonder Woman, which is derived from, obviously, Batman vs. Superman, but it's a standalone movie as well. You can take away that aspect and still be a good standalone movie. You had Baby Driver, Spider-Man, which is taken from, obviously, the Civil War movie, working into the Marvel Universe. And then you had War for the Planet of the Apes, which is the third installment of that new Apes series, as well as Dunkirk. So now you had Baby Driver, and Dunkirk, which are your more original pieces, but you had still sequels. And now, again, it's okay as long as they're good. Now, I don't consider Guardians of the Galaxy 2 a good movie. In fact, I dislike that movie very much like I dislike Jurassic World 2. However, they still made a lot of money, and that's what those movies are for. They're for that big tentpole aspect. There's movies I didn't mention, like The Mummy or Transformers or King Arthur or Alien Covenant and Baywatch. You get your obligatory action hero movie with Baywatch, also comedy mixed in there. You have your action movie with King Arthur. You have your science fiction horror movie with Covenant. So you have them all there, right? It's all there. Now, 2016 is a year that I think is what kind of sparked this idea for me that summer movies are dying, that something's wrong. Because throughout this year, I'd look at 16, and I circled one movie of substance, and that was Captain America Civil War. It started off the whole summer. Here's what else came out in 2016. The Nice Guys, X-Men Apocalypse, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, another version of that, Warcraft, Finding Dory. Now, I should have circled that. That was a quality movie, good sequel, and your animated movie of the year. Independence Day 2, Ghostbusters, the female version, Star Trek Beyond, which was better than the second, but still kind of forgettable, Suicide Squad, Ben-Hur, Jason Bourne, and Tarzan. Now, that's a who's who list of crapfest. That's not a lot of good stuff happening throughout that year. So no doubt I had that mindset of what's going on with summer movies. Why is this year suck so bad? But then you look at 2015, the year before that, and this might be one of the better movie years in the summertime anyways, since 1982. So in 2015, we had Avengers 2, of course. I don't like the movie, but big budget movie, big spectacle movie. Inside Out, your obligatory animated movie. Jurassic World. You had Tomorrowland, Mad Max Fury Road, Mission Impossible Rogue Nation, and Ant-Man. 3 awesome movies that had that dominated summer. And then you had Fantastic Four and Terminator Genesis, Arnold Schwarzenegger back in action again, San Andreas, The Rock with his, action movies, and then you had Straight Outta Compton. So you had a lot of really good movies mixed in with some really big movies, but also just a really good year overall. So I that's why when I say maybe summer movies are dead, no, they've actually taken the last decade for 2010. They've taken a shift and gotten back into them. It looks like, and so now I want to take it back a step. Let's get away from the recent movies, and I want to go back to where this all started at. I want to get away from now, and let's go back to then. So let's look at the 1990s. I'm sorry, the 1980s. Okay. First, let's mention the 70s, because you have Jaws came out in 75, Star Wars came out in 77. That started the craze for the summer blockbusters. That's what this is really stemming from. That's where this all comes from. Now, you also had Alien in 1979. And in 1980, you had the first Star Wars sequel, right? Empire Strikes Back. So in 1980, I just wrote this one down. Here's an example of staying away from the big dog when you know it's coming, right? So in 1980, after Star Wars, they knew it was coming out. Empire Strikes Back came out. You also had Airplane. You had Blues Brothers. You had Caddyshack, Friday the 13th I mentioned earlier, and The Shining. So 2 horror movies that came out that summer. Caddyshack, your comedy of the year. Blues Brothers, a classic movie that's lived on forever. And then you had Airplane, another great comedy for that year. But then Empire. But again, everything stayed away from Empire because they knew that it was going to be a big movie. So the summer blockbuster craze hadn't hit yet. They knew that summer was where you wanted to be, but it hadn't taken hold just yet. So in 1981 is, I think, where it started to really kick into gear. You had Raiders of the Lost Ark, so that's the combination of Spielberg and Lucas making those the two big summer blockbusters, making their together blockbuster, which was just genius, right? So in 81 you had Raiders of the Lost Ark. You also had Superman 2. You had The Werewolf in London, which is your obligatory horror movie. Escape from New York, and Clash of the Titans. Now, I know Clash of the Titans is kind of like a B movie, cult movie, but Escape from New York is an awesome movie. Might not have garnered the success it needed, like most Carpenter movies do on opening week or that when it was released, but it's lived on forever, and it's been, obviously being used a lot when it comes to other people making their movies, is using that as a template. So it's a really good year, but this is the start now. This is the start of the summer blockbuster, right? So you have Raiders, and then you have all these other good movies that came out. Now in 82, this might be the best year ever, but in the summertime, it's fantastic. And I'll explain why here. So in 1982, you had E.T. By itself, that's your summer. That's all you needed for that summer. That was the biggest movie of the year. You also had Star Trek: The Wrath of Khan. Fantastic movie. Tron. Now, the next four movies I'm going to read off are instant classics now. So they weren't instant classics. They're classics now. But these movies did not get well received, but they still came out in the summer. I'm talking about Blade Runner, The Thing, Beastmaster, and The Road Warrior. Now, right there, you have the makings of the most amazing summer ever made with those four movies. But then you throw in E.T. and Wrath of Khan in the mix, and you have even more. But also, Poltergeist, obligatory horror movie. Fast Times at Ridgemont High, obligatory comedy. And Conan, your obligatory action hero movie. So now you see that they're starting to pick up, they're understanding what's going on now. So 82 is, I think, where all of the Jaws and Star Wars and Raiders, that build-up of the summer, I think, came to a head in 1982 where they finally understood it. And that's what you're seeing in that summer. Huge, huge year. So what else you got? So 1983 now. Now this is like in 1980, you have another Star Wars movie coming out. So I think they were wise. The different studio heads across the world or in Hollywood said, let's stay away from that summer when it comes to your big budget movie, especially near that time frame. But let's make a lot of other great movies like Trading Places and War Games and Vacation and Risky Business and Mr. Mom. A lot of great comedies came out in 83. And the biggest movie of that summer was Return of the Jedi. So it was one of those unique years like 1980 where they hadn't fully understood the summer blockbuster power yet. They were getting there. But 83, they understood it, but they also knew that you're not going to fight with Star Wars, especially the last chapter of Star Wars, right? Let's leave that one alone and let that clean up summer, and everything else will be stuff that you can go to that's not your big budget movie, but very good movies. All those movies are fantastic, right? So that's a really unique year. So let's look at 1984. 1984, again, they understood it, and you have a lot of great movies, but you also have that one big tentpole that they didn't stay away from, but they still packed it in throughout the rest of the summer. So you had Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. Now, it didn't do nearly the success of Raiders, so it's not nearly as great as a movie as Raiders, but it still was a big movie that summer. But here you got Ghostbusters. You have Gremlins, Karate Kid, and you also have The Last Starfighter, and Never Ending Story, and 16 Candles. There's your comedy. I don't have any animation movies noted at this point yet. We're going to be getting there when you get to the 90s. But you're seeing the same type of template throughout these years. But there's certain times, like in 83 and 80, where you stay away from that big dog because you know that's a losing fight, right? So 84, I think, might be one of the better years. It might be like of the ones that I collected here, it's my number 3 of summers because of Ghostbusters, Gremlins, Temple of Doom, and Karate Kid right there, and 16 Candles. I mean, throw it in there. That's 5 great movies that will always live on, right? Okay, so then we're going to get away from the early 80s, and I want to go jump into 1989. Now, this like the Jaws and Star Wars aspect, redefined the summer movie. And this is really interesting. So in 1989, you had your Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. So you had your last installment of the Indiana Jones movie. You had When Harry Met Sally. You had Do the Right Thing. You had Roadhouse, your obligatory action movie. You had Weekend at Bernie's, your obligatory comedy. And then you had Parenthood and The Abyss. So I don't see any horror movies that I wrote down for that matter, but there's probably a horror movie that I just didn't write down. But the big movie that came out that year, even though they had a Temple of Doom, even though they had Indiana Jones on the docket for the summer, they still went out and made Batman. Now, no one knew how great Batman would be received. But Batmania took over, and that dominated the summer. You had a lot of really good movies, but Batman is what everyone remembers from that summer. And in fact, The Last Crusade probably gets swept under the rug a little bit. I think it came out later in the summer compared to Batman, which was earlier summer. But that dominated. And this changed everything. The 90s were greatly affected by that very fact. Kind of like the 83 with Return of the Jedi and 1980 with Empire. The companies started to understand when there's that big of a movie for a sequel coming out, stay away from it. And so let's look into that now, because after 89, this changes the scope of summer movies. Okay, let's look at 1991 to start. So in 1991, you had your 3 or 4 great comedies right off the bat. You had What About Bob, City Slickers, and Hot Shots. I'm sorry, I love Hot Shots. If you don't like Hot Shots, hell with you. I love Hot Shots. You also had Robin Hood, Kevin Costner's Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, which I adore too. Screw you if you don't like it. And then Rocketeer. Not as greatly received, but a great science fiction movie. Really nice attempt at doing something different. But the big movie that came out that year was Terminator 2 Judgment Day. Now, I'm pretty sure no one thought this movie would be that big. But coming off of Terminator and being James Cameron, he's made a lot of great movies up to that point, right? So having him make this movie with Arnold Schwarzenegger, I think they kind of understood that this would be a big movie. Not that it meant it was going to be great, but they knew it was going to be big, so they stayed away from it. There was no other big blockbuster as far as your big budget spectacle movie other than Terminator 2. I found that very odd. So let's jump into 1992. That's the year that Batman had a sequel, Batman Returns. So guess what? Nothing else of no other big movie came out that year. It's crazy. They stood away from it because they figured, hell, if Batman did so great in 89, let's leave 92 to Batman Returns and be done with it. But they also made a movie like League of Their Own. So League of Their Own came out in the summertime. And that was a great movie because not everyone wants to see a superhero movie, right? You got to have other things to balance it out. You got to have your horror movies, your comedies, your romantic comedies. You got to have everything out for everybody else. Not everyone wants to see Star Wars, as crazy as that might seem. Right? No? Okay. So 92, that's about it. But 93 is another one of those watershed marks. Watermark years? I don't know what I'm trying to say. But Jurassic Park dominated and was the summer of 1993. Now, you also had a great movie that came out that year. Again, a different kind of movie, which was okay to do. It wasn't the same type of big spectacle, but it was The Fugitive with Harrison Ford and Tommy Lee Jones. That movie killed it. When it had a long run time and it lasted for a while. That's one of those examples of, yes, you have Jurassic Park and Cliffhanger and The Last Action Hero and Sleepless in Seattle. People want to go see other things other than Jurassic Park, right? They might not want to see an action movie or a suspenseful dinosaur movie in the middle of the summer. They might want to go see the romantic comedy like Sleepless in Seattle. They might want to go see The Fugitive because it's an action movie, but it's not that kind of action movie, right? So that's what's great is they're starting to figure that out. So 93 is another one of those years where they stayed away from the big budget movie, let Jurassic Park have its thing. So now we jump into 1994. This is one of those odd years, the odd year out, because it is full of a lot of really good movies, but lacks that one huge movie that everyone stayed away from for the 90s. So here we have Speed. You have The Lion King. This is from one of my notes show. This is like the start. I think Pocahontas came out before that, but as a year-by-year basis, this is where it started, was The Lion King, which was huge that year. Forrest Gump. Again, dominated, big movie, very memorable, but I don't know if you can consider it the big budget movie that you expect in the summertime, but it was a big movie. True Lies, probably your closest to the big budget movie. The Mask with Jim Carrey, and Natural Born Killers. So again, packed full of good stuff, but not one of those that you have to stay away from. Not the Terminator, the Jurassic Park, the Star Wars, or the Batman movie. It was kind of a free and clear year to go crazy, kind of like 1982. Throw everything out and see what hits, right? And a lot of good movies came out that year. And then the last year I took down for the 90s was 1995. Again, you have another Batman sequel, Batman Forever. Now, Batman Returns didn't do so hot. Forever didn't do so hot as well. But they still kind of stayed away from it because it was a Batman movie. So you had Die Hard, your obligatory Die Hard 3, your obligatory action hero movie. You had Braveheart. You had Congo, your obligatory horror movie. You had Judge Dredd, another Sly movie there. Apollo 13, and then Waterworld. So now you have, oh, look at that. So 1992, League of Their Own, Tom Hanks. 93, Sleepless in Seattle, Tom Hanks. 94, Forrest Gump, Tom Hanks. And then Apollo 13, 95. So 4 years in a row, he dominated. The summer right there. So you had some really good movies in 95, but it's the Batman factor. The Batman factor kept away a lot of the other movies that might have come out during that time frame. And a lot of them were failures. Judge Dredd, Congo, Waterworld, failures when it comes to financial success there, right? But again, an example of staying away from the big dog when it comes to Batman or Star Wars or that big sequel that you know is going to be big like Jurassic Park or Terminator 2. Well, Jurassic Park wasn't a sequel, but you know what I mean. Okay, before we get to the 2000s, what have we learned so far? So we know that the genesis of summer movies happened in the late 80s, thanks to Spielberg and Lucas. And then the 80s, they started to recognize this and attack this and slowly but surely gain that understanding that throw as much as you can in the summertime and you're going to make a lot of money because everyone wants to go see a movie in the summertime. It became a thing, right? It became a hot button. So now they also started to learn that there was times where you don't want to attack the giant. So you let Star Wars and Batman do its thing. You let those big movies do their thing. But you get into the 90s where they shifted. Now they're shifting in the 90s to kind of not having too much in the summertime that's not going to compete with the giant, but still having a lot of other material out there, other comedies and other things. So they took a different approach to it. So now that we get into 2000s, this is where things get bizarre for me. Now, I didn't write a whole lot down for the 2000s because there wasn't a whole lot to write about. In fact, it was very interesting when you think about what happened to the summer movies in the 2000s. So I wrote down two because in 2001, 2001 we have we have The Mummy, we have Pearl Harbor, Jurassic Park 3, Tim Burton's Planet of the Apes, yeah, that one, Tomb Raider with Angelina Jolie, and Shrek, your obligatory comedy or animated movie. So a lot of really misfires, right? Pearl Harbor might have made a lot of money, but that's a junky movie. Not a junky movie, but I just do not like it. The Mummy was a lot of fun. Jurassic Park 3 was not very good. Neither was Tim Burton's Planet of the Apes. And then Tomb Raider was, is what it is. So you had a really interesting, this is what started a lot of misfires and a lot of opportunities that they were trying to make something different and going different directions with their heroes, and it wasn't working. So I also wrote down 1 year of note is 2005. Now in 2005, you have the third and final the last prequel, the episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. That came out as well as Batman Begins. Now they had no idea that Batman Begins was going to be as dominant as it was, right? And that's going to be another change. This much like 89 with Batman, 2005 with Batman Begins changed a little bit down the road. But sticking with that, you have nothing else coming out that year. Clash of the Titans and a lot of other crappy movies that came out in 2005 that just were not very good. And now you have 2008. So we're talking about Batman. That seems to be a prevalent thing here because he kind of dictates the summer. So in 2008, you had The Dark Knight. Now, everyone had an idea that if Batman Begins was so good, The Dark Knight was going to just dominate or at least be badass. So everyone stayed away from it. Nothing else came out that year except for Iron Man, which was a surprise, and then WALL-E. So you have your obligatory animated movie. So interesting, those 2 years were the best of those 2 years. Now, I saw a lot of movies in the 2000s. I'm not saying there weren't good movies. There's really good movies that happened in 2000s. It just seems to be my least favorite of the decades. And I think because they were playing it safe, they were going to material that wasn't really working, like Tomb Raider. The video game idea started happening more and more in the late 1990s and then into the 2000s. But there were a lot of misfires. I mean, so many misfires as I went through listings of different years or throughout the 2000s. And I was like, wow, that's why. Missed opportunities, misfires, playing it safe, and changing the scope of the action hero. You start to see throughout that time frame, 2000s, that the action hero changed. Instead of Arnold and Bruce and Sly, you had Jason Statham. You had the beginning of The Rock. You have Jet Li. You have a lot of different kinds of action heroes that weren't the same type. They were doing a little bit more, I don't know how to really quantify this, but they just weren't the same kind of heroes. And it didn't resonate with people. The movies that they were coming out with just didn't work. And so that's what the entire year is filled with misfires and missed opportunities, and a lot of television show remakes or television show that were made into movies happened throughout this decade. And you look at it and you go, why? What was the decision making? Were they trying to play it too safe? Were they reaching for stuff that was different? Were they getting a different vibe from the audience? Because it just didn't work for the summertime at all, except for those 2 years, 2005 and 2008. You had your Star Wars movies and your Batman movies. That kind of set the stage for the rest of the summer, or rest of the decade for that matter. But it's really weird when you look at 2000s. Where did all the good movies go? Well, they were just scattered around, and they weren't centered in the summertime, and they weren't the big budget blockbusters that you would expect. And when they did have one, they were utterly just complete failures. Okay, so that gives us through the last couple decades. You got the 80s, the 90s, the 2000s, and again in the 2010s, we've seen more a resurgence to the summer movie. Yes, they might be sequels, and that's not a bad thing. Having a sequel, as long as the movie's good, I'm down with it. You can take material and remake it into something else, and I'm down with that as long as the story's good. But the idea here is, back in the day, you had a longer runtime for theaters, and for a movie in a theater is what I mean. So they were in the theaters for a lot longer. Nowadays, you have 2 or 3 weeks. If you're not making the money, you're not pulling in the tickets, you're out of there, and someone else is coming in. So there's a lot longer span of time that movies were out back then. It was more about word of mouth. Now we have so much thrown at us, so much information, reviews and opinions and Facebook and Twitter that they tell you exactly what it's about before you go see it. And then you're left with all these television commercials showing you all these clips of the movie before you go see the movie. And now by the time you see the movie, it feels like you've already seen it. And that's, I think, a discredit to the movies now, is that they're trying to force feed so much information to get you to make that choice to go see that movie. But it ultimately defeats the purpose, because you're showing way too much information to a point where now they're not even interested in seeing it. And if you just make good movies, the word of mouth gets out there. Now, sometimes it doesn't work the way you want it to. Blade Runner, The Thing, they didn't do well in the theater, but they picked up speed afterwards. And that, it doesn't help them at the time in the box office, but it can help the DVD sales or the VHS sales, the VHS sales back in the day. But ultimately, it comes down to, we have way too many options now when it comes to YouTube, when it comes to Netflix, when it comes to Amazon Prime, all the streaming sources. You don't have to go to the theater to see it anymore. In fact, most people are watching before it even comes out in the theater on some kind of device on their phone or their computer. So it defeats the purpose, but that's what makes it harder for the summer. It makes it harder because you've got to get people in the seats, and they don't want to take a chance on movies anymore. They don't want to take a chance on something that's might be groundbreaking or something very revolutionary when it comes to filmmaking. They don't want to take those chances unless they can guarantee those seats. That's why you see the sequels. That's why you see the regurgitated material, whether it's a TV show or a character that they know. If there's somebody that they know that they can trace back to another audience that's still alive, they're going to make that movie. They're going to make that series. They absolutely have to, because you look at what's coming out now. It's all coming to try to get the people of my generation back in the theater again, because we're taking our kids now, because it's all the same stuff that we grew up with. So it's interesting, but when you look at the summer in the different decades, there's no rhyme or reason to it. There is no hard, fast rule. The summer can be mixed up with some bad years and some great years, except for 2000. That whole decade sucked, apparently. But with the 80s, 90s, and 2010s, it can be interchanged. You can have one big movie, you can have a lot of really good movies, or you can have a mixture of them, like in 2015 and in 1982. Well, I hope you enjoyed this episode of the J. Craig Podcast, as I just rambled on about summer movies. And are the summer movies dead? I don't think they are. I think they're alive and well. They just taken on a different shape, a different form, like they have evolved over the course of several decades. But they're still out there. But there's more to see now, because we're seeing them throughout the year, which is really cool. So you don't have to wait till summer. You can get them in November and December, March and April. And I think that's really cool. That's great for the viewer. So again, thanks for listening to the J. Craig Podcast. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button right there. Right there. Hit that button, and then check out our other videos, as well as go to thejcraig.com to have access to all of our content, whether it's the movie reviews or all of our episodes from the podcast. We thank you for listening. Take care. Bye-bye.